Hey, hey, hey! How's everybody doing? Welcome to another edition or another episode of Motivation Sucks, the show that's all about bridging the gap between material success and spiritual fulfillment so that you know that you're making the kind of impact that you were made to make, and that you're not sacrificing your integrity, but that you're able to also create material success to whatever degree that looks like for you. So, like we talked about last week, this week we're going to be diving into a three-part series on how to experience the 360-degree breakthrough. And we discussed briefly last week that there were three barriers in between where you are right now and where it is that you say you want to go. And just for a bit of housekeeping, if you will, let me just start off by saying that and remind y'all that if you can see here that what we're doing is the online internet business success edition. And what that means is that while this is a methodology that you can apply to anything and that you can apply to any area of your life, what we're going to be using as the teaching model is how to build a sustainable business with systematic certainty using these methods. We're not going to be going into the details of marketing and business development online, but more of a strategy and the principles of creating the kind of success that you want to see using this. So shifting out of the motivation driven mentality and shifting into the tale of two paths, shifting into inspiration based action. And so in order for us to create the right understanding, what we talked about last week was some preliminary foundational things that are necessary to be able to create from there. And we also discussed that this week we were going to be covering one of each of the three breakthroughs, if you will, or breakdowns. In other words, the barriers in between where you are right now and where it is that you say that you want to go. And so to create that, what we're doing is we started with the foundation last week, and then each of the next three workshops, we're going to be diving deep into each specific barrier and what is the breakthrough and how to anticipate when you're coming up against the barrier, and also how to execute that breakthrough so that you can experience the success for yourself and go beyond the perpetual pursuit of success that you never can quite reach, that's always just a little bit outside of your grasp, and actually be able to live it and experience it in the real world, so to speak. So before we get to that, what I want to do is I want to just kind of give you an overview so that you understand what this entire week looks like. And what we're looking at here is each of the individual three barriers, along with each of the three breakthroughs that go through them. And you'll notice that there's a hierarchy to them. In other words, that each breakthrough and each barrier gives way to the next one so that you can eventually get there. And this is the journey. So I wanted to start off by talking about the specifics of this overall journey so that you have a framework to look at and work from. And if we look at this from a standpoint of the, like if down here is, say, where you are right now. That represents where you are at this moment on a particular subject. Now, maybe you're not down here, but maybe you're somewhere in the middle, and or on some other barrier. But let's just say that where you are is down here, and where you want to get to is this center of the bullseye up here. Now, let's call that center of the bullseye your unprecedented, bigger future. And I want to say that again, your unprecedented bigger future, because in order to experience the 360-degree success breakthrough that we're talking about, where you can have both material success in terms of all the toys and the wealth and the financial freedom that you're looking for, and at the same time have that meaningful fulfillment where you know that you're answering the call of the wild, so to speak, the call that you know that you were put here on this earth to create, to generate, and to give back, so that you know that you're making a difference, so that you know that you're making an impact, and at the same time creating wealth for yourself, but doing it at the world's service, in something that you're proud of, in something that you're excited to bring to the world, so that it's not a trade-off. It's not an either-or scenario, right? So let's talk about, like, down here is, let's say, where you are, and let's say up here is where you want to be. Now, let's represent this again as the unprecedented bigger future. And what does unprecedented means? It means that you've never lived it personally. So I don't care what it is, whether you're a multi-billionaire, but there's still something that you strive to achieve, or you're extremely driven and successful, but yet we have goals. We're looking to achieve something else, and we're not yet living it. Well, that's unprecedented for us, right? It's up here in this bullseye. And so what I mean by that is just to take into consideration that unprecedented means that you've never experienced it to the degree that you wish to be living it at. So that's the definition, right? And that's our goal for achieving the 360-degree success solution. And each of these are progressive in nature. In other words, each barrier and each breakthrough is the stair step to the next barrier and breakthrough, till you finally can achieve that ultimate unprecedented bigger future that you're looking to create for yourself. Now, here's the thing about an unprecedented bigger future. You've never lived it, so there is no evidence that you can personally point to say, I did that or I can do that. So there is an element or a leap of faith. Now, you may look around at other people, at other business models, at other things that you're looking at in the world, and you know that it may be possible to achieve that if you're looking at somebody else's business model, and you're saying, well, I could have that, but I've never lived it. So what I'm getting at is that even though there's evidence, so to speak, that somebody else can live it, you don't have any evidence that you can point to say that this is it. I know that I can do this. So there is an element of bridging the gap between where you are right now and where it is that you want to get to. So just keep that in mind, because here's the thing about evidence. If you had the evidence to yourself, then you'd already, like, if you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt with zero uncertainty that you could live that life, that because you've lived it before, then you'd be living it right now instead of striving to live it. Does that make sense? So I'd like you to just really, really let that soak in for a minute, because there's always going to be a gap between where you are right now and being able to successfully put into action whatever it is that you're looking to achieve the first time if you've never done it before. Meaning that there's a learning curve. There's a big difference between learning what to do intellectually and being able to successfully do it, to perform it inside of your specific, unique, and different situation that is based upon your specific conditions, background, what you're facing, what the resources are that you have to work with, all of those things. Right? All right, so now let's move into some more stuff for you here. So if we go down here and let's see. Yeah, there we go. That's a full slide. And let me move myself off to the side there. And so this is now we know that we have this journey, and we have we're going to cover each of these in succession. Something to consider, and let me just back up. Well, actually, let me just put it up right here, and let's do it on this just for a second, so we can recall back to the full journey here. You may be on a particular topic. You may be down here, in other words, the furthest away possible from achieving, from living the things that you want to live. You may be up here. You may be, conquered it, or you may be facing this last bit of barrier that you might not have considered being a barrier before, which is motivation. And that's the whole premise for why I'm calling the show Motivation Sucks. Because it's actually going to be the thing that keeps you from achieving sustainable success, ongoing, perpetual income, perpetual happiness, perpetual impact, all of those things on an ongoing basis. So what we're going to do is we're going to start down here and assume that you're starting at the lowest point in the process, i.e. down here, where you can see my little laser pointer here. And we're going to work our way upwards from the point down here. And then we're going to progressively talk about each of the specific 3 barriers and the specific breakthrough necessary to take us there. So just give me a second, and so I can get set up here. Now, when we are today, in this episode, we're going to be talking about the barrier of confusion, i.e. overwhelm, those types of things, and the breakthrough to take us through that. Then in episode number 5, we're going to talk about the second barrier, and then the third barrier in episode number 6. And so that way we can, by the end of this, the next 3 episodes, we can have a fully well-rounded 360-degree breakthrough. All right, so we talked about the why we want this, right? Why you want this, because so that you can go from the endless pursuit of it to the actual living of the material prosperity, the material success, and the meaningful impact and the difference. And that's the why we're doing this. The what is this path and the specifics of what we're going to be talking about right now. And then the how is what we've been talking about all along. And remember that we're using the teaching model of a specific, building a successful secondary income in the online world. All right. So that's the teaching model, and then you can also apply it to a number of other locations depending on what you're looking to achieve and how you're looking to build it out. All right, so the thing that I'd like you to really kind of grasp here is that when you're way down here in this area, we have these feelings. And you can tell which of the three barriers you're coming up on based upon how you feel. Does that make sense? So when you're feeling, and by the way, these are all labels, right? And these are symbolic or symbols, if you will, for the different things that you may be feeling. What you'll notice is that these are the steps to the clarity breakthrough. And the reason why I want to point out that these are labels and that they are symbolic in nature is because whatever you call them is right for you. Whatever your label of them are and whatever nuances. I mean, there's probably between these four areas, there's probably several hundred different words that have a slightly better or different meaning, but they mean the same kind of thing. They're all fear-based oriented emotions. And so whatever you call it, wherever you tune it in, you know where you are and you know what feels better versus what feels worse. And what I mean by that is that if we're just talking in kind of broad brushstrokes here, depression, whatever your definition of it is, and that feeling that you get when when it's like it's beyond hopeless to I'm helpless, right? Like there's nothing that I can do about it. It's hopeless. It's helpless. I'm helpless. There's no point in here. That feels worse overall than just outright fear or anxiety about something that you're trying to achieve. So in this case, whatever your label for it is, whatever you're talking about, in this case, fear is a better feeling than depression, than apathy, than feeling helpless. Fearful, sometimes, that triggers your fight or flight. And sometimes fight is how you can, have that breakthrough, or the flight is action, but you're still moving. When you're in depression, when you're in helpless and hopelessness, in those feelings down there, well, then what you've got going on is why even bother? You don't feel like running, because you can't get away from it. What's the point? You can't get beyond it, because what's the point, right? So fear does feel a little bit better, or whatever labels whatever words you want to use for this does not matter, right? It's which feels better, this emotion or this emotion. And we're not talking about big giant leaps. We're talking about small leaps, and we're talking about small spaces. But here's the thing: when you get to anger feels better than fear. Because when you're angry, it's like you feel like you want to fight back because something is, preventing you from achieving the things that you want to achieve. So you're angry that you're not there, or you're angry that something may be preventing you, or it feels that way, right? So you're angry, but that feels more empowered, more able to make a change or strive for a change or believe that a change is possible. Yeah? So anger feels better. And then frustration, well, that feels even better yet than anger, right? Because frustration is like, well, like I was so close, or I just keep on, like I'm just missing a few key things. Well, as you move into, from depression to fear to anger to frustration, you can be sure and you can get excited, because as you're doing this, you're getting closer to the clarity breakthrough that takes you through this overwhelm, that takes you through the confusion, right? That barrier there. So the thing that we've got to make sure that we're aware of is that clarity is literally translates into a state of light, like clear, see-through, transparent. So it's a form of enlightenment, unprecedented enlightenment. Okay, and it's I'm just trying to. It's where you have the ability to reach an understanding inside of that state of light. And so where you might not have a full understanding prior to this, right? You now have, when you get clarity, you have some understanding that you didn't have before. And now some light, there's some light on the subject. Now, here's the thing that you need to be aware of. Clarity cannot occur in the specific situations of uncertainty. If there's any uncertainty, you can't have clarity. So clarity is an absence of uncertainty, if that makes sense. So there's no vacillation, there's no hemming and hawing when you have that clarity breakthrough. And when you experience that clarity, when you experience the breakthrough, right? When that happens. You feel it. So the thing to take into consideration here is that it's hard to go from a negative emotion that hurts more, even to, straight up to a more of a bigger leap that's still considered negative and or fear-based. However, when we've got from here, we can take a slight leap and go to fear, where we feel slightly better. We feel a little bit better about where we are and a little bit, more understanding, that type of thing. And then from here, we have access to jump into the next better feeling, as opposed to trying to, go to from in one fell swoop from down here all the way up to the ultimate bullseye right there at the top, right? I got to turn the camera around. So all the way to the top, where the bullseye is, to where it is that you want to be, that you've never been before, that unprecedented bigger future that you've never been to before. So when you are, it's a lot easier to work through the techniques that we discussed last week about being the objective observer and your Fred story. So what are the things that are going to keep you stuck in this area? Well, it's your Fred stories, right? It's those unconsciously conditioned stories that you don't even know that you don't know, that are running your show, that are that you have now believed because it's been driven so far, so deep. That was weird. It's been driven so deep into your unconsciousness that it becomes part of what you believe to be a fact, to be just the way it is. It's just the way it is. It's an absolute fact, right? So when you think about it from those terms, the things that we were talking about last week, and once we get through, don't worry about the how to bridge the gap. I just want you to understand what the process is right now and notice them. Just like last week when we talked about the specific hows with your Fred story, was to stop for a minute, pause, and ask yourself, is that true? When you've been triggered, when you're feeling a particular emotion, is that true, or is that a Fred story? And just that breath of stopping and observing your thoughts and observing the way that you have it, what you believe to be true, and the way that that looks. And when you pause for a minute there and you look at that is accessing your objective observer that we also talked about briefly last week. So that's how you bridge the gap, and it's all about R&Ding, if you recall back to last week's episodes as well, which stands for R&Ding Fred, which is recognize it, neutralize it, and then dissolve it. And the actual conscious recognition of a Fred story that is actually the one producing the emotion, producing the situation. Now all of a sudden you see it for the truth that it is, which is simply a story that you've made up and told yourself again and again and again until you believed it to be true. The only difference is now you can see that it in fact was a story, was a Fred story, and that you had that ability to then work within that. So that's the some of the tools. But I'd like you to just become aware of that, because you can start to, the specific hows for the barrier of confusion is, well, let's say that the subject that you're on, you don't feel overwhelmed, you don't feel frustrated, you don't feel like you're coming up, like you're cautiously optimistic, or there has to be a way, or that's a different barrier and a different breakthrough on that particular subject. But since we want to start at the bottom here and give everybody the tools to go from wherever you are at the very bottom of the scale all the way up to the top of the scale, we want to be able to build our case, or our stair-step story up the ladder here. And that's why we're starting with each breakthrough and each barrier in succession here. But in terms of the how, when you're stopping and you now have some specific subjects that you can tune into. And if they're feeling fearful in nature, or fear-based, or, less than empowering, less than joyful, then you can be sure that there's something in your unconsciousness that there's a gift waiting for you if you will stop and observe it by asking yourself, is that true, or is that a Fred story? And the minute that you observe whether it's true or a Fred story, what you will see is, let's say you're down here, and it doesn't matter where you are, but if you observe that your Fred story is a fear-based thing, like why does this always happen to me? I knew that was going to happen. I can't ever get ahead. And if you're there, then if you stop and ask yourself, is that true, or is that a Fred story? In that moment, you're now making this conscious, and you will have access, whether it's anger or something that feels a little bit better, to gently nudge yourself up as you're gaining practice. And then the next thought that comes to mind won't be as heavy if you're truly doing this. It won't be as heavy. It won't be as, cumbersome as the previous one. And then you can just move to the next level, whatever that happens to be for you, and ask yourself, is that true, or is that a Fred story? And then move on to the next one, like that. So that's the overarching thing. Now, the cool thing about this, about all of this, frankly, is that when you start to tune into those emotions that and an emotion is just a trigger based upon something that you believe to be true. A belief triggers the emotion in you, and it could be a positive emotion that empowers you to bring you forward, to bring you closer to where it is that you say you want to go. Or it could be a emotion that feels heavier, more negative, and it brings you further away from where it is that you want to go. But if you just keep that as the guidepost, then you can immediately tune into where you are in the journey, which one of the stopping points you're closest to, and which barrier that you're coming up against. And instead of getting upset when you get towards overwhelm, when you get towards frustration, when you get towards, oscillating back and forth, maybe between getting pissed off and frustration, a little bit of anger, a little bit of frustration, that's an exciting thing, because you're about to, if you will continue to ask yourself, is that true or is that a Fred story? Use some of these tools, and I'm going to give you a whole host of other tools as we go through the succeeding episodes here. And we're going to show you how to apply this all so that it doesn't become a problem. It doesn't become heavy for you to do this. But for right now, the easiest one is just to take a pause for the cause and ask yourself, is that true or is that a Fred story? So that you can get some distance between what's triggering the emotion and the thought or the belief. And by the way, we're going to talk about this in a lot of depth, not probably next week, but maybe perhaps the week after or the week after that. But a belief, all a belief is a thought that you think again and again and again until you believe it to be true. And so, like, all of them have the potential to be a belief. And once we believe it to be true, that makes up our reality, because it also unconsciously and consciously filters what we allow ourselves to see in terms of other possibilities. And by giving yourself some space, by just allowing yourself to observe your unconsciousness a bit and see this, this is one way that you can start to think about your thoughts, to be able to pause between the thought, or to pause between the emotion, the trigger, the thing that you're feeling, that you're having this automatic reaction to, and pause in between there, because between stimulus and response is this magic area that you can access your God space, if you will, on how to be able to observe and think about your thoughts. Because if you will start to look at this, you will see in reality that what's happens is that you are actually the emotions that are triggering you, that automatic reaction that caused that emotion in you, at the root of it is some sort of a thought or a belief that triggered that emotion. And if you're now looking for it, whatever that, and a story is just a thought or a belief that we've told ourselves again and again. It's a story that we've made up and we've told ourselves, like the Fred story, like we're trapped in that jar and we can't get out and the lid is covered and there's just, it's hopeless, right? So those are the same things, but in the act of thinking about the thought and tracing it back to the thought or the belief that is in fact thought, that is mental in nature, that you created the understanding or the belief, then you have now the ability, and you actually are being the objective observer, because you're observing what was once unconscious thought, and you're now looking at it just very consciously as such. So let me just pause for a second here and take a quick drink. Okay, so what we have now, the third piece of this puzzle for this particular barrier of confusion, of overwhelm, of, where do I go from here, is, and this is where you've got to be a little cautious and just be truthful to yourself, be true to yourself, and ask yourself again, like, if you feel like, oh, I need more clarity, is that true, or is that in fact an excuse to stall? Only you know the answer to that. More often than not, I think what you'll find is that it's actually a Fred story in disguise. It's not clarity. It's, I gotta figure out why I got here. How did I get here? Why did I get here? And until and unless I know what it was, until and unless I can figure this all out and, make this reality come true, like I've got to stop here, and until I know how I got here, until I know what created this, then I can't move on from here. And in fact, that's connected to what we talked about on Friday, which is the trying to figure it out trap. And that's not the clarity breakthrough, because clarity leads to enlightenment, leads to empowerment, leads to clearness of space, light, enlightenment, an expanded awareness that immediately allows you to move forward if you so choose. It doesn't necessarily mean that it requires action, but you're no longer feeling hindered because you have now some understanding and some knowing inside that you didn't have before, and you have less uncertainty or zero uncertainty or whatever, than you had before. And now you have more clarity. The less uncertainty that you have in the specific situation on the specific topic, that's where it starts to come into play. So the thing that you should look out for with the clarity breakthrough is, do not get stuck in trying to figure it out in terms of, how did I get here? I got to know what I did wrong or what the situation was so that I don't repeat the situation. There's a saying that I believe it goes like, history is doomed to repeat itself if we don't take note of it. And in fact, if we study history, all that does is guarantee that that's what we're focused on. The history, the problem. And so it is an excuse to not gain the understanding, to not have the clarity breakthrough. It is a way that Fred tricks us. It's a Fred story. It's a layered Fred story. That Fred has now got us chasing the, how did I get here? What did I do wrong? It was this program that screwed me over or whatever. And now that's not figuring out how to have the clarity breakthrough. That's figuring out why you're here and how you're here and what brought you to this point. And that's all in your past. And the only place, we talked about this last week, that your past exists is in your memory. Literally does not exist anywhere else. So when you start to, the problem is that we relive those past stories, and we tell ourselves the same stories again and again. And rather than observe them as actual stories, we relive it as though it's true for us right now in this moment. And unless we go into memory and we bring it back up and we recall it, there is no past. It just is, right? The only thing that is right now. And I don't want to get all esoteric, but this is important because it is the trick that we pull on ourselves with trying to figure it out, with stalling, with hiding from the truth and hiding from what we're trying to accomplish. And so in these moments, what I often, and I have sticky notes on my desk and on my computer to remind myself of this is, am I stalling? Am I trying to figure this out? Or am I actually, is this something that's moving me forward? And then if it's moving me forward to what? Like, it's another question that I love, which is, what are we really trying to accomplish here? Am I trying to achieve some sort of success in business because it's what everybody else says I should have? And or did I actually intentionally choose this for myself? Where did that go? What did that come from? Those types of things. So when you have that to fall back on, and you have some really good questions to ask yourself, and when you start to use the emotions, the automatic reactions as cues to observe the reactions that you've been having and the thoughts that are at the root of it, and knowing that is at the root of that is a Fred story, then you can ask yourself, once you see that, are you trying to argue to stay stuck? Are you looking because that's in essence what we do when we look for how and why we're here, we end up saying to ourselves, well, I want you, you end up arguing for staying exactly in the same spot that you are, because you're then looking for evidence. You gather up all the evidence that supports why you got here, how you got here, and all the things. And by gathering up that evidence, that further supports your story, and it makes it more true for you. It drives it, the story part of it, deeper into your unconsciousness, and it becomes a more well-founded foundation for your Fred stories that you are simply blind to without it. Now, on the other side of it, as soon as you start asking yourself, am I trying to justify where I am? Am I trying to explain why I'm here? Then you know that all of these things can be used as like a divining rod, right? It's pointing you to how to release it, how to let go of it, how to be free of it forever. And the secret is not to bury it. It's not to ignore it. It's to allow it to be present. It's to acknowledge it without it being, without it defining you. Now, in the beginning, that's easier said than done. At least it was for me. Maybe you guys have, you're faster at it than I was. But for me, in the very beginning, the point of being able to not have it mean anything to me and not have it define me, I couldn't see that. But what I could see is, oh, let me just assume that that's my cue, that that's a Fred story, and that was, running me. And let me look for that. And then I can go to the next level. And whatever pops up next, if I look at that, and then look at that, and then look at that, eventually I can unwind it all. And now it becomes easier and easier and easier, where you can actually hear and see those Fred stories in the past a lot clearer. You can look at it backwards in your mind, and eventually you'll start to notice when you get triggered in the moment, you'll see that gap start to close, where it's sooner and sooner in the moment if you'll continue to practice this. And so some of these cues are how you're feeling. Some of these cues are the emotions and the types of emotions, and to be able to stop and ask yourself these questions are the how. That's just simply taking an inventory. And if you've done this from last week, you probably have some experiences to share, and I can't wait to hear about them so that we can get down with it. And another thing to be aware of, particularly where it comes to this clarity breakthrough, so that you know whether you are experiencing the trying to figure it out trap, or whether you're really moving in the right direction to experience, to live the clarity breakthrough necessary to take you to that next level of understanding that changes everything afterwards. Like, you don't bounce backwards, because it's a new level of awareness, of understanding. And so there's another tool that I'd like to give you specifically, or another trigger to be aware of this, that you can ask yourself, or that you can repeat, or that you can, I have it on sticky notes all around my office. I have it on my whiteboard. Now it's just a part of me. But this is particularly important when it comes to deciphering between the clarity breakthrough and trying to figure it out, asking yourself the how and the why did I get here, and all of that stuff. And it's simply this, and I would suggest that you write this down. No results plus a justified Fred story does not equal results. So this is where everything that we've just come into play on comes into effect. Everything that we've been discussing now is encompassed in no results. In other words, not being able to have the outcome, to live the life, to experience the success, or whatever the goal is, the results that you're looking for. not having those results, plus a good story, a good Fred story that justifies why, no matter how valid that Fred story might be, and it could be 100%, like absolutely in your mind valid and right and correct. Well, no matter how justified that Fred story feels to you, that plus not experiencing the success, not experiencing and living the results that you'd like to live, does not equal results. And so if you stop and you ask yourself, what are we really trying to accomplish here? That's where you start to understand that, wait a minute, there's no point in coming up with a good justification, a good story to justify, to explain away why I didn't get the results that I want to get, because all that's serving to do is to trick you into trying to figure out how and why, not how and why to have success, but how and why you're stuck, how and why you're justified in being stuck. So you're looking then for the evidence that's going to support you in being justified and in validating the fact that the reason you couldn't have the results that you wanted to have is because of this. And that just serves to disempower you even more and to move you backwards on that emotional scale where you feel, hopeless, helpless, what's the point, and down there in those doldrums. So and for me, what I find is a key phrase that I've trained myself to use as a cue, just like the cue of some sort of emotion to stop and observe and ask yourself, is this true or is this a Fred story? Anytime that you either feel like you're saying or you're actually you hear yourself saying, blah, 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 didn't happen because I didn't have the success that I wanted because of X, Y, and Z. Whatever happens after because is a justification. It is a story. Now, I'm not saying that it isn't valid. I'm not saying that it isn't legitimate, because it may very well be. All I'm saying is that it's not going to lead you to the clarity breakthrough that will raise your level of awareness to the point that you need to be at to solve the problem that's preventing you right now in the circumstance. Because the same level of thinking that created the problem can't solve it. You can't solve the problem from within the problem. All right. Now, this, I spent an enormous amount of time on this particular barrier and breakthrough and setting up the whole thing to begin with, so that you have the whole journey and understanding. But the same principles that we're going to be talking about, there's different nuances and there's different key ideas for each of the other remaining two big barriers and their respective breakthroughs for further distinctions. But this is the core foundation necessary that you can then apply there. All right. And remember, as the teaching model, we're talking about business success, particularly online business building success in the online world. So confusion around how to have a second income, confusion around, those types of things. But remember that these are principle-based universal ideas. So all of this applies no matter what it is that you want to adapt this for and to, whether it's, within the online business success and financial elements of your life, or whether it's inside of, say, relationships or health or wellness or whatever. The same thing applies here, because if you're down here where you don't want to be on any subject, and where you really want to be is up here, then all of these journeys and the emotions that are connected with them are the same. And as we start to get into some of the other techniques next week and the week after and the week after that, and we start to really round this out and give you the full scope of how to apply this in your life, how to adapt it to your specific and different unique situations, based upon your background and your needs and your desires and your vision, that's when we're going to start to talk about some specifics with, and still be principle based, but in terms of the core fundamentals or the principles of building an online business. But I wanted to start and really go deep here because that'll allow us to move faster in our fifth episode and then our sixth episode for us to achieve this whole 360 degree success solution. All right, so I think that's the perfect spot for us to wrap up on. And I'm just going to look over my notes real quick here and make sure that I didn't miss anything crucially important. Well, I think we talked about the big ones. Okay, so the three big takeaways, just to recap, the three big takeaways of the confusion barrier and the clarity breakthrough is: number one, the emotions are going to point the way to or away from the breaking through it, and and only you can decide what feels better, slightly better, and you can use the techniques that we've been building on and the foundation that we've been laying in the previous episodes and everything that I just discussed earlier to be able to really dig into that. The second thing that we talked about is to be aware of the trap inside of the clarity breakthrough, to make sure that it's not a disguised distraction of trying to figure it out, the trying to figure it out trap, where you need to figure out why and how. So that's the second big takeaway here. And the third one is that you can apply all of this stuff and build on what we talked about last week in terms of pausing when you have an automatic reaction, an automatic emotional reaction, and asking yourself, is this true or is this a Fred story? And then allowing yourself to go into the scenario, like, are you justifying? Are you arguing to be stuck? And that is really the core things about the clarity breakthrough that you need to be aware of. And just asking yourself, just being aware that it's possible that this is the case, that you've been tricking yourself, or that Fred's been tricking you into being distracted, into arguing to stay stuck. Then you can just simply tell yourself the little formula, which is no results plus a good justification, a good Fred story, does not equal the results that I'm looking for. So what am I really trying to accomplish here? And then I can pull myself back on course. And the big difference between motivated action, now these are things that you've been doing to a greater or lesser degree, but my guess is that up until this point, you've been unconsciously operating from a motivation-driven action orientation. In other words, you have motives for action that are outside of you, that are of the world rather than of your conscious choice. And so when you start to see this, this is the foundation for you to be able to shift and know that you're no longer have to be stuck, number one, but also that you can move forward. No results plus a good justification of a Fred story, a good justification Fred story, right, does not equal the results that you look for or that you are wanting. But here's the key. Now you can start to consciously decide where it is that you're going, where it is that you say you want to get to, not where it is that I think you should go, that your parents, that your kids, that that everything that you see online, all your friends, not any of that. That's all outside of you. Now you can come from your particular sounding board, and the more that you will stop and pause and look at this, the better that you will get at recognizing your unconscious Fred stories, the conditioning that's been in there. And each time that you do, it gets easier. It gives you more ability to do it even better and see more and more of it. It's until you can start to make really massive updates fast. But here's the good news in all of this. If you will just do this regularly, it's kind of the slow, fast way. In other words, like you can shift really, really fast. It doesn't have to take years. It can take a minute, a couple of minutes, 5 minutes, where you can then gradually, just each time you equalize there and you ask yourself the same stories, the same questions. So anyway, the point is that the third big takeaway for all of this is no results plus a good Fred story, no matter how justified, no matter how great it may be, legitimate it may be, valid it may be, doesn't matter. None of that is going to give you the results that you want. So the only thing that you really need to, this is so freeing once you finally internalize this, once you finally really embrace this concept, because you've been wasting so much of your energy, so much of your heart share, so much of your mind share, trying to justify, trying to reinforce and argue for why it is that you're, trying to figure it out and to stay where you are. So much of that has been there that you will find that if you will embrace this and say, oh, because really the only thing that really matters when you're doing this kind of an evaluation is where is it that you are? What's going on? Like I said, I wanted to go here, and where am I in conjunction where it is that I say I want to get to? And the I said I want to get to is key, right? So but we're going to leave that for building onto that as we go along here. But the point is that if you will start to let go of this stuff, then the only two things that you've got to worry about is what happened, like, what are the results that came of what I'm trying to achieve, where it is that I'm trying to go, and what's next in terms of what's the next move in light of where it is that I say I want to get to. Because the only thing that matters is where are you in relationship to where it is that you say you want to go. Did it bring me closer or did it take me further away? And there's no emotion attachment to that. There's no good or bad or whatever. It's just, did it bring me closer to where it is that I said I want to go? Or did it bring me further away from where I wanted to go? And if I argued for why I'm staying in the same place, why it didn't bring me any closer, or why it brought me further apart, now I'm staying stuck instead of just evaluating and letting go of all that crap so that you don't have to be weighted down by any of that anymore. And this is so freeing once you fully embrace it. Anyway, thank you so much. And I really am excited that you're here with me. And we've got some great things to come this week. We're going to finish up with the second barrier and in our next episode, and the third barrier in the episode after that, and the respective breakthroughs. And now that we have this foundation, you may want to listen to this episode a couple of times, because this, again, is going to give us the same foundation and allow us to move a lot faster through the other two barriers, even though those are going to be the ones that feel like they're heavier, worse, harder to break through. And in fact, you'll find that there's no levels of difficulty here. All of it is actually pretty easy if you allow it to be. You can R&D all of this really, really fast. You can recognize, neutralize, and dissolve it like at light speed and make light speed progress like nobody's business, but it all starts with small baby steps and building on it. So we'll be digging into this, and I appreciate y'all. I'll see you in episode number 5. And we're cooking here for the 360-degree prosperity breakthrough. See ya.